honest. Like, I'm not like these other reality. Like, I'm a real bona fide 5-time Emmy-nominated journalist. Difference. So for me, I am not comfortable publicly saying or calling someone else a liar without knowing the legitimate facts. That's where I'm standing with that. I wasn't on no, you're not my friend. I don't want to side with you. It wasn't nothing to being messy, but my responsibility for my job and my integrity.
The internet took one conversation and turned it into a wildfire, and Kandi Burruss was left standing in the middle of it. After Tamar made comments that fans say crossed a line, social media twisted the moment into something far bigger, louder, and more invasive than anyone expected. Clips were reposted without context, assumptions spread like facts, and suddenly Kandi's name was trending for reasons that had nothing to do with her work. Insiders say the emotional toll became overwhelming as strangers debated her personal life like it was public property. Tamar may not have intended the chaos, but once the internet gets involved, intention stops mattering. What followed was backlash, hurt feelings, and a very real reminder that words don't stay where you put them. And when the noise finally hit its peak, Kandi reportedly broke down under the pressure of watching rumors eclipse reality. What started as commentary turned into chaos almost instantly. One moment, fans were debating opinions. The next, Kandi Burruss was trending for reasons that had nothing to do with her music, her business empire, or her work ethic. The internet had latched onto a narrative, and it refused to let go. The spark came after comments made by Tamar Braxton, comments that many viewers felt crossed a personal boundary. Tamar didn't present receipts, she didn't frame anything as a confirmed fact. But the tone, the implication, and the way the moment was clipped opened the door to rampant speculation. And once that door opened, social media kicked it wide open. Clips were reposted out of context. Headlines softened nuance and sharpened controversy. Comment sections filled with assumptions that escalated far beyond anything Tamar actually said. Within hours, the story wasn't about Tamar's words anymore. It was about what the internet decided those words meant. That's when the pressure hit Kandi. Fans began tagging her non-stop, demanding responses to rumors she never created. Instead of asking for clarity, many assumed access, as if Kandi owed the public an explanation for every narrative being pushed about her private life. That entitlement is where things turned ugly, because silence was interpreted as guilt. Emotion was interpreted as confirmation, and restraint was interpreted as weakness. According to people close to Kandi, the emotional weight became overwhelming. Not because of any single comment, but because of the volume. Watching strangers debate your life like it's a storyline strips away humanity. It reduces a real person to a talking point, and Kandi felt that deeply. She's always been known as one of the most level-headed figures in reality TV. Business-minded, direct, grounded, someone who doesn't feed mess unnecessarily. But even the strongest people have breaking points, especially when speculation targets identity, family, and personal boundaries all at once. That's when reports began circulating that Kandi was visibly emotional behind the scenes. Not crying for the camera, not performing vulnerability, but reacting privately to public pressure. Meanwhile, Tamar's role in the situation became a topic of intense debate. Some fans defended her, arguing that she never intended to spark such invasive speculation. Others criticized her sharply, saying that when you speak publicly, you're responsible for the ripple effects, whether you intended them or not. Both perspectives clashed online. What complicated things further was the long, complicated history between Kandi and Tamar. Fans know there's respect there, but also tension layered with misunderstandings from years of reality TV. That history added emotional fuel to the fire, because viewers framed the moment as personal rather than incidental. And personal moments travel faster online. The narrative quickly shifted from what was said to why it was said. People speculated about motives, about jealousy, about hidden resentment. None of it confirmed, all of it amplified. Kandi, meanwhile, stayed quiet, no immediate clapback, no defensive livestream, no cryptic posts. And in internet culture, that silence became its own storyline. Some praised her restraint, saying she refused to dignify harmful speculation with a response. Others criticized her for not setting the record straight, ignoring the reality that addressing rumors often gives them more oxygen. This is the impossible position public figures find themselves in. If you speak, you escalate. If you stay silent, you're accused. There is no winning, only choosing which damage you're willing to absorb. As the story grew, the emotional toll became clearer. Fans who genuinely care about Kandi began calling out the invasiveness of the conversation. They reminded people that commentary should never morph into identity speculation. That disagreement doesn't justify dragging someone's private life into the spotlight. Those voices mattered, but they were quieter than outrage. Blogs continued posting updates with little new information. Reaction channels dissected facial expressions and tone instead of facts. And every retelling pushed the narrative further from its origin. That's how rumors evolve, from suggestion right arrow to assumption right arrow to accepted belief. What got lost in all of this was Kandi's humanity. She wasn't a headline. She wasn't a storyline. She was a person being talked about, not talked to. And that disconnect is what reportedly led to her emotional breaking point. This wasn't about being exposed. It was about being overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by misrepresentation. Overwhelmed by entitlement. Overwhelmed by watching people debate parts of her life she never offered for discussion. As for Tamar, the backlash landed hard. Some fans demanded accountability, saying public figures must think carefully about how their words can be weaponized. Others argued that the internet, not Tamar, was responsible for taking things too far. But once chaos starts, blame becomes fragmented. This is where part 1 ends, at the emotional peak, where words spoken casually turned into a storm, where silence became survival. And where one woman's composure cracked under the weight of speculation she never asked for. Once the story caught fire, it stopped belonging to the people involved and became internet property. That's when things escalated beyond control. Blogs didn't wait for clarification, fan pages didn't wait for context, and reaction channels didn't wait for facts. They waited for engagement. Headlines grew sharper, captions grew bolder, nuance disappeared completely. What Tamar said was no longer quoted. It was interpreted, and interpretation quickly turned into assumption. Fans began repeating each other's theories so often that speculation started sounding like truth. That repetition gave the narrative weight it never earned. For Kandi Burruss, this phase was the most emotionally draining. The conversation had moved far away from her control. People weren't reacting to her actions, they were reacting to a version of her life created entirely online. That loss of control is devastating. Imagine opening your phone and seeing strangers argue about your personal life as if it's public property. Imagine watching rumors attach themselves to your name without any way to pull them off without making things worse. That's the position Kandi was placed in, and the pressure kept mounting. Fans tagged her relentlessly, demanding explanations. Some framed their curiosity as concern, others as entitlement. Very few stopped to ask whether their questions were appropriate in the first place. In the age of social media, access is often confused with permission. It didn't help that the silence from both sides was being read in opposite ways. Kandi's quiet was labeled as avoidance by critics and dignity by supporters. Tamar's lack of immediate clarification was seen by some as indifference and by others as being overwhelmed by the backlash herself. Neither woman publicly fueled the chaos, yet both were pulled deeper into it. That's the irony of viral narratives. You don't have to participate to be consumed by them. As the days passed, the emotional toll became more visible. Sources close to Kandi said the constant speculation began affecting her mood and energy. This wasn't about one rumor, it was about watching her name get dragged into spaces she never invited. Kandi has built her career on transparency in business, not transparency in personal identity. She's always drawn a line between what she shares and what she protects. The internet crossed that line and did it loudly. Meanwhile, the conversation around Tamar Braxton grew harsher. Some fans accused her of being careless with her words, saying she should have anticipated how the internet would twist them. Others argued that she became a scapegoat for a culture that thrives on sensationalism. Both sides had points, but the damage was already done. What made this situation especially painful is the history between the two women. Fans know their relationship hasn't always been smooth, but it's been built on mutual respect more than malice. That history made the narrative feel personal, even if the chaos wasn't intentional. And personal stories travel faster. As more commentary flooded timelines, the conversation shifted again, this time toward emotion. People weren't just discussing rumors, they were discussing Kandi's reaction to them, her facial expressions in past interviews, her tone in unrelated clips. Everything became evidence. That's when reports of Kandi crying began circulating, not as a spectacle, not on camera, but privately, overwhelmed by a narrative she couldn't stop. Those reports softened some public reaction. Fans began calling for compassion. They reminded others that speculation has real consequences, that even strong, successful women have breaking points, but not everyone listened. The internet doesn't pause easily. Some doubled down, arguing that public figures should expect scrutiny. That fame comes with a cost, that silence invites questions. Those arguments ignore a crucial distinction. Scrutiny of actions is not the same as speculation about identity. That distinction matters, and it was lost in this chaos. As backlash continued, some blogs quietly softened their language. Reaction videos added disclaimers. The narrative began to wobble, not because truth emerged, but because outrage was losing momentum. But momentum isn't required to cause harm. Damage can occur long before clarity arrives. This phase of the story exposed a painful reality. Once rumors reach a certain volume, they don't need proof to persist. They sustain themselves through repetition and emotional investment. Kandi didn't respond publicly, not because she couldn't, but because responding would have meant stepping into a narrative she never agreed to. Sometimes the healthiest response is to refuse participation altogether. And Tamar, facing backlash of her own, appeared to pull back as well. The chaos had grown bigger than either of them, fed by algorithms, amplified by speculation, and consumed by an audience hungry for resolution. But resolution wasn't coming, because there was nothing factual to resolve. This is where part 2 ends, in the middle of the fallout, where emotions are raw, narratives are unstable, and both women are dealing with the consequences of a story neither one fully controlled. As the noise continued, the story quietly shifted into its most damaging phase, the one that doesn't trend but lasts the longest. This was no longer just about backlash or viral clips. It was about trust, relationships, and the emotional residue that speculation leaves behind long after the internet moves on. For Kandi Burruss, the impact reached deeper than public image. It touched personal safety, emotional safety. When identity-based rumors circulate, they don't just affect how strangers see you, they affect how safe you feel being yourself in public spaces. Every interview becomes guarded. Every appearance becomes calculated. Every word feels like it could be twisted. That kind of pressure changes people. Kandi has always been outspoken about boundaries, about knowing what to share and what to protect. This situation forced those boundaries into overdrive, not because she had something to hide, but because the cost of openness suddenly felt too high. The internet had shown it would take whatever was offered and stretch it beyond recognition. And that hurts, especially when it comes from a space that once felt supportive. At the same time, the strain on the relationship between Kandi and Tamar Braxton became a quiet but constant undercurrent. Neither woman addressed it publicly, but fans felt the distance. The ease that once existed between them seemed replaced by caution. And in the world of public friendships, caution is noticeable. That doesn't mean anger, it doesn't mean malice. It means recalibration. When someone's words, intentional or not, trigger a storm that lands on you, it changes how safe you feel around them. Even if forgiveness comes privately, trust takes time to rebuild. Especially when millions of strangers are involved. This is the part the internet rarely considers. Public apologies don't fix private hurt, clarifications don't erase emotional impact, and healing doesn't happen on timelines. As weeks passed, fans began noticing a shift in how the story was being discussed. Less certainty, more reflection. Some viewers admitted they jumped to conclusions. Others questioned why speculation about identity had become entertainment in the first place. That shift didn't happen because new facts emerged. It happened because empathy slowly replaced excitement, but empathy moves slower than outrage. By this point, the narrative had exposed something uncomfortable about celebrity culture. How easily people confuse curiosity with entitlement. Wanting to know something doesn't mean you deserve to. And fame doesn't cancel the right to privacy, especially when it comes to personal identity. This situation became a reminder of that line, and how quickly it can be crossed. For Tamar, the fallout also carried weight. Facing criticism for sparking a conversation that spiraled beyond control forced her into a difficult position. She didn't create the rumors, but her words became the entry point. That kind of unintended consequence doesn't disappear easily. Sources close to Tamar suggested she was affected by the backlash as well, not defensive but reflective. Because watching your words cause pain, even unintentionally, leaves a mark. And the internet doesn't leave much room for grace when emotions run high. Both women were left navigating something neither signed up for, being central figures in a conversation about identity that never belonged to the public in the first place. As time passed, the story began to fade, not resolved but replaced. Another headline took its place. Another controversy filled timelines. That's how the cycle works. But fading doesn't mean forgetting. Search results still exist, clips still circulate, assumptions still linger, and that's the quiet cost. What made this chapter especially instructive is how it showed the difference between what trends and what matters. Trending moments burn fast, emotional impact lasts longer. And while the internet moved on, the people involved had to sit with what remained. This phase also revealed how silence can be misunderstood, but still necessary. Neither Kandi nor Tamar rushed to reclaim the narrative publicly. And while that frustrated some viewers, it protected something more important: their humanity. Not everything needs to be corrected in public. Not every rumor deserves oxygen. And not every conversation belongs to the crowd. By choosing restraint, both women refused to let speculation dictate their next steps. That choice didn't end the conversation immediately, but it prevented it from growing further. And sometimes that's the win. This part of the story isn't dramatic, it isn't loud, it isn't clickable, but it's real. It's the part where public figures draw lines, where relationships reassess, where healing happens quietly without performance. And it's where this chapter naturally leads, toward closure, not through answers but through distance. By the time the internet's attention finally shifted elsewhere, the damage had already been done quietly, invisibly, and without resolution. This is how most viral storms end, not with truth, not with apologies, but with exhaustion. For Kandi Burruss, the most difficult part wasn't the rumors themselves. It was realizing how quickly the public felt entitled to parts of her life she never offered. The conversation wasn't about her work, her legacy, or her achievements. It was about speculation. And speculation strips people of complexity. That's what hurt. Kandi didn't break down because she was exposed. She broke down because she was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by commentary masquerading as concern. Overwhelmed by strangers debating her identity. Overwhelmed by watching silence get twisted into meaning. And yet, she chose restraint. She didn't give the internet the reaction it wanted. She didn't clarify narratives she didn't create. She didn't perform vulnerability for sympathy. Instead, she stepped back, and that step back was an act of self-preservation. Because sometimes, engaging only deepens the wound. For Tamar Braxton, the aftermath came with its own reckoning. Watching her words spark such intense fallout forced reflection. Even without malicious intent, impact matters. And in the public eye, intent rarely survives the algorithm. This wasn't about blame, it was about consequence. Words spoken publicly don't stay contained, they echo, they mutate. And once the internet gets hold of them, they stop belonging to the speaker entirely. Tamar learned that in real time, and so did everyone watching. What makes this chapter important is what it reveals about modern culture. We reward speculation, we amplify implication, we confuse access with entitlement, and then we act surprised when people retreat. As the noise died down, what remained was perspective. Viewers who initially jumped to conclusions began questioning their own reactions. Some acknowledged they'd crossed a line. Others recognized how easily commentary can turn invasive when identity becomes entertainment. That shift didn't trend, but it mattered, because it showed growth. The relationship between Kandi and Tamar may never look the same publicly, not because of irreparable harm, but because boundaries changed. And boundaries changing isn't failure, it's evolution. Public figures don't owe infinite access, they owe themselves protection. This story doesn't end with a statement or a confrontation. It ends with something quieter and far more real. Distance, recalibration, and the slow rebuilding of emotional safety. And that's okay. Not every conflict needs closure on camera. Not every rumor deserves resolution. Not every silence is an invitation. What this saga ultimately teaches is restraint, for creators, for commentators, and for audiences. Because behind every headline is a human being navigating consequences the internet never sticks around to clean up. As the cycle moves on, one thing is clear: dignity doesn't always trend, but it endures. And those who choose it, even at personal cost, leave with something far more valuable than attention. They leave with themselves intact. Now I want to hear from you. After everything we unpacked, do you think the internet crossed the line, turning comments into full-blown identity speculation? Should public figures be expected to clear up rumors they didn't create? or is silence sometimes the healthiest response? And where should the line be drawn between commentary and invasion of privacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments respectfully, because these conversations matter more than quick clicks. If you appreciate breakdowns that focus on context, accountability, and humanity instead of reckless rumors, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. When real updates happen, not speculation, we'll be right here breaking them down clearly and responsibly.